Today is October the 3rd. How did David win over Israel? Let's find out together as we read the first part of 2 Samuel. Reading through the Bible in a year, I'd like you to read 2 Samuel, the first 6 chapters, chapters 1 through 6. At the end of 1 Samuel, Saul died. David was actually not present. He was unaware of what was going on back on the battlefield between Israel and the Philistine nations. Now, in chapter 1, David learns of Saul's death. And the way he learned about it was through a lie. An Amalekite came to him and said, Saul and his sons are dead. David said, how did it happen? And the Amalekite said, I came upon Saul. He was wounded. He asked me to kill him, so I did. And here I brought you his crown and his armband. Now, David he was a man of deep, deep emotion. David composed a song about the death of Saul and Jonathan. Now, Jonathan, we'd expect, he loved Jonathan, but Saul had pursued him for most of David's adult life. And yet David sings a dirge for Saul. He also looks at the Amalekite and says, how could you kill so easily God's anointed? And David had him put to death. Now, this becomes important later as we see that David is consistent in the way he deals with Saul and Saul's family. We'll come back to that in a few chapters. In chapter 2, David is appointed as king over the tribe of Judah. This probably included the tribe of Simeon, which was completely surrounded by Judah, and they tend to be treated together at this point. But Saul's remaining son, too young to join him in the battlefield, Saul lost 3 sons in the battlefield. He had 4 sons. In 2 Samuel 2:8, the son's name was Ishbosheth. And Abner, the general of Saul's army, takes Ishbosheth and anoints him as king. Now, it's interesting, the name Ishbosheth. Ish, Hebrew word for man, and Bosheth, the Hebrew word for shame. What father would name his son the man of shame? Well, actually, he didn't. We find in 1 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 33, that Saul had 4 sons, Jonathan, 2 others, and the final was Ishbaal. Saul named one of his sons for the god Baal. When the biblical writers wrote about Ishbaal, they couldn't bring themselves to even name that name. So instead of the man of Baal, they called him the man of shame, Ishbosheth. In chapter 2, Ishbosheth begins to war against Judah. There is a war now between Israel and Judah. Judah following David, the other 10 tribes following Saul's son Ishbosheth. At the end of chapter 2, Joab, who was David's key general, Joab had a brother named Asahel. Asahel was very fast. He saw Abner and he began to chase Abner. Abner started to run, and in running, Abner said, don't chase me, you might not like what happens. And sure enough, At the appropriate time, Abner spins around and Asahel dies. Joab's brother is killed. David in chapter 3 begins to rule. He goes to Hebron, which is where the temple is located, the tabernacle is located. So David makes his capital at the religious center of Judah. We have several of David's sons mentioned, but the turning point was when Ishbosheth went to his general Abner and accused him of laying with one of his father's concubines. Whether he did or not, we really don't know. Abner says it's an accusation. Abner is irate, and he says, I'm going over to David. I'm going to take all of the Israelite army with me. He does. David gives him a big feast. Abner says, let me go. I will meet with the leaders of the 10 tribes. And when I come back, you will have all Israel following you. That's what Abner says. But when Abner leaves, Joab, whose brother Abner killed in the previous chapter, comes to Abner and betrays him and actually kills him. At the end of chapter 3, David again sings a song for Abner's death. In chapter 4, Ishbosheth is murdered. When the two who killed Ishbosheth come to David to say, we've killed your enemy, David has them killed. Again, he honors God's anointed by killing those who killed him. In chapter 5, then all the tribes of Israel went to David at Hebron and told him, we are your flesh and blood. The rest of the 10 tribes now follow David. But it is interesting that in chapter 5, verse 5, the biblical writer says that now David was king over Israel, and he had already reigned over Judah. He was king over Israel and over Judah. In the rest of chapter 5, David captures the city of Jerusalem from its inhabitants. And in chapter 6, he moves the ark to Jerusalem. He conquers the Philistines who had been warring against Israel all this time. And by the end of chapter 6, Israel is at peace. They have victory over the Philistines. David owns the city of Jerusalem, which is called the City of David for the rest of eternity. And he makes that, again, the civic center, the center of his palace, and the religious center. Now, I mentioned the biblical writer refers to David as king over Israel and king of Judah. He says that in 5:5. He repeats that in chapter 11, verse 11, in 12:8, in 21:2, in 24:1 and 9, and then in 1 Kings, we're told that Solomon became king over Israel and Judah. The interesting thing to remember is that Judah retained an identity separate from the other tribes. In fact, in chapter 24, when David takes a census of all fighting men, it says that Israel had 800,000 fighting men. Judah had 500,000. Keep this in mind as we come to 1 Kings in a couple of weeks. We'll see this division, that existed all the way back at the beginning of David's reign, some 70 years later, become a reality when Israel is divided into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. We started with the question, how did David win over Israel? He won over Israel by treating the leaders of Israel with honor. He had the one who said that he had killed Saul. He had him slain. He had the murderers of Ishbosheth slain. He sang songs for the death of these men. And eventually, as we'll see tomorrow, he picks one of Jonathan's sons, the only remaining survivor of Saul, and actually brings him into his own house and treats him with honor. A king that treated his enemy with honor, Israel followed David. Like, follow, and subscribe to this devotional on whatever platform you use to listen to it. Email your questions to us at questions@becomehope.com. Tomorrow, we'll answer the question, does God play favorites?